Doctor. Lina Mercado stared at the readouts sprawling across her holo display, her heart pounding with a heady mix of exhilaration and trepidation. After years of research and countless setbacks, Project Prometheus was finally bearing fruit. Quantum entanglement waveform holding steady, reported her lead engineer, Kai. Field strength approaching target threshold. Lina nodded, her eyes never leaving the cascade of data. Prepare to initiate phase transition on my mark. Around her, the gleaming cylinder of the Q-Lab thrummed with barely contained energy. The cutting-edge facility represented the culmination of humanity's quest to unlock the ultimate secrets of the universe, the ability to manipulate the very fabric of spacetime. And Lina Mercado, lead quantum architect of the Astral Dynamics Corporation, stood at the forefront of that epochal endeavor. All stations report ready, Kai confirmed, his voice tight with coiled tension. We are go for phase transition. Lina drew a deep breath, her finger hovering over the activation key. This was the moment of truth, the point of no return. If their theories were correct, the Q-Lab's reactor would generate a stable wormhole, a tunnel through the tangled architecture of the cosmos itself. It would be a breakthrough of unimaginable significance, opening up the stars to human exploration as never before. The sheer potential for discovery, for expansion, was staggering. But there were risks too. The energies they were harnessing were titanic. The forces they were manipulating poorly understood. If something went wrong, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lina shook off the flicker of doubt. They had prepared for this moment exhaustively, running countless simulations, refining their models to a razor's edge. The time for hesitation was past. Initiating phase transition ... now. She stabbed down on the activation key. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a rising thrum that set her teeth on edge, the Q-Lab's reactor sprang to life. A blinding point of light bloomed at the heart of the containment chamber, a searing pinprick that rapidly expanded into a swirling vortex of scintillating energy. Lina watched in awe as exotic particles danced and spun in the maelstrom, the very warp and weft of the universe laid bare. Wormhole stability confirmed, Kai shouted over the rising roar, throat diameter holding at 1 meter. Cheers erupted around the control room as the implications sank in. They had done it. They had punched a hole through the barrier of spacetime, forged a path to the infinite reaches of the cosmos. But even as the champagne corks popped and backslaps were exchanged, Lina held herself apart, her gaze fixed on the readouts, still cascading across her display. Something wasn't right. The wormhole's energy signature was fluctuating in ways their models hadn't predicted, its exotic matter sheath wavering like a candle in the wind. She opened her mouth to raise the alarm, to call for an emergency shutdown. But before she could give voice to her fears, the universe itself beat her to the punch. With a sickening lurch that seemed to turn reality inside out, the wormhole convulsed, its throat yawning wide in a silent scream. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks as the Q-Lab systems overloaded, the fail-safes and circuit breakers utterly overwhelmed. Klaxons howled as the chamber's containment field failed, the eldritch energies of the wormhole spilling out in a ravenous flood. Lina could only watch in horror as her colleagues were engulfed, their bodies twisting and warping, as the primal forces of creation unmade them cell by shrieking cell. She screamed Kai's name as he dissolved before her eyes, his features stretching and distorting into a nightmare parody of humanity. Then the wormhole's hungry maw found her, and she knew no more. Oblivion claimed her, a yawning chasm of nothingness that swallowed her whole. For an eternity or an eye blink, she hung in that timeless void, her very sense of self eroding away. And then, like a diver breaching the surface of a midnight sea, she was back. Sensation returned in a dizzying rush, the cold press of metal against her cheek, the acrid tang of smoke in her nostrils, the distant wail of emergency sirens. She levered herself up on trembling arms, her mind reeling as her eyes fought to make sense of her surroundings. She was sprawled on the floor of the Q-Lab, the once pristine chamber now blackened ruin. The containment cylinder lay shattered, the twisted skeleton of the reactor rising from the debris, like the bones of some ancient leviathan. Of Kai and the others, there was no sign. Lina staggered to her feet, grief and guilt crashing over her in a drowning wave. The wormhole had taken them, snuffed out their lives as casually as one might pinch out a candle flame. And she was responsible. Her hubris, her blind pursuit of knowledge, had unleashed this catastrophe. The weight of that realization threatened to crush her where she stood. But even as despair coiled around her heart, a flicker of something else kindled in its core, a fierce, defiant spark of determination. She couldn't let their deaths be in vain. She had to find out what had gone wrong, to ensure that their sacrifice had not been for nothing. She lurched toward the ruined control panel, heedless of the sparks that stung her skin. Miraculously, some of the readouts still functioned, the holo displays flickering fitfully in the gloom. She pored over the cascading data, her mind racing as she struggled to make sense of the Q-Lab's final moments. The wormhole had been stable, all parameters within expected tolerances. But then, at the instant of phase transition, something had gone catastrophically wrong. The exotic matter sheath had inverted, the wormhole's topology twisting in on itself in a mind-bending Mobius loop. Instead of a tunnel through spacetime, they had created something far stranger and more terrifying, a churning nexus of raw probability, a roiling maelstrom of quantum uncertainty. In that unimaginable crucible, the very laws of physics had bent and broken. The Q-Lab and everyone within it had been caught in the collapsing superposition of a trillion different realities, a Schrodinger's box of cosmic proportions. Lina felt a wild bark of laughter bubble up her throat as the sheer scope of the disaster sank in. They had reached too far, dared too much. In their hubris, they had sought to plumb the ultimate mysteries of creation, and creation had struck back with a vengeance. But even as that grim epiphany crashed over her, Lina felt a flicker of something else kindling in her mind, a strange, alien awareness, a sense of presence, for want of a better word. It was as though the wormhole, in its unimaginable death throes, had imprinted some echo of itself onto her consciousness, a quantum ghost, a spectral shadow of the eldritch forces they had unleashed. With mounting dread, Lina realized that she could feel the wormhole still not as a physical thing, but as a writhing tangle of probability waveforms, a seething ocean of quantum potential. It pulsed and surged at the edges of her perception, a living thing hungering to be born anew. And in that moment, she knew with a cold certainty that the Q-Lab disaster was only the beginning. The wormhole's ghost would haunt her, waking and sleeping, a constant, maddening reminder of the Pandora's box they had opened. She had to find a way to lay this quantum specter to rest, to undo the damage they had wrought. She owed that much to Kai and the others, to the colleagues and friends she had led into the abyss. But even as that resolve crystallized in her heart, Lina knew it would be no easy task. The forces they had unleashed were beyond human understanding, the secrets they had glimpsed too dangerous for mortal minds to bear. She would have to venture into uncharted realms of science and consciousness, to push the boundaries of the possible further than anyone had ever dared. She would have to become something more than human, to evolve beyond the limits of flesh and bone. Only then could she hope to confront the quantum ghost that haunted her, to find some way to heal the bleeding wound they had torn in the fabric of reality itself. Lina Mercado, lead quantum architect, stood alone in the ruins of her life's work and knew that her true mission had only just begun. She squared her shoulders, a new resolve settling over her like armor. She would see this through no matter the cost. For Kai and the others, for the future of humanity itself. The Q-Lab had been the crucible of her folly. Now, it would be the forge of her atonement, the quantum crucible in which she would be reborn. Lina turned from the wreckage, her steps steady as she strode out into the uncertain future. The universe waited beyond, vast and strange and full of terrors. And she would meet them head-on, unflinching and unafraid. For she was Lina Mercado, and she would not be broken. The quantum crucible had claimed her, and she would forge herself anew within its fires, or perish in the attempt. But one way or the other, she would have her reckoning. Lina stared at the swirling lines of code scrolling across her display, her eyes bleary from countless hours of unbroken concentration. In the months since the Q-Lab disaster, she had thrown herself into her work with a desperate, manic energy, poring over every scrap of data from that fateful experiment. Somewhere in the petabytes of sensor logs and instrument readings, she knew there had to be a clue, a hint at how to undo the damage they had wrought. But the secrets of the quantum realm guarded themselves jealously, and progress was painfully slow. Even with the vast resources of Astral Dynamics at her disposal, Lina felt like she was groping in the dark, fumbling toward an answer that always seemed to dance just out of reach. The wormhole's ghost haunted her every waking moment, a constant, nagging presence at the edges of her consciousness. She could feel it even now. A writhing tangle of probability waveforms seething just beyond the veil of perception. It whispered to her in the silence of her dreams, a siren song of forbidden knowledge and eldritch power. Lina shook her head, trying to clear the cobwebs from her exhausted mind. She couldn't afford to let herself be distracted, not when so much was at stake. She had to stay focused to keep pushing forward no matter the cost. A sudden chime from her console jolted her out of her reverie. She glanced at the flashing alert, her heart leaping into her throat as she read the message scrolling across the screen. Anomalous quantum signature detected. 99.8% match to QLab wormhole event. Lina's fingers flew over the interface, calling up a detailed analysis of the signal. It was coming from a remote region of space far beyond the borders of explored territory, a region that had been flagged as off-limits by the Astral Dynamics board, a quarantine zone where strange and unexplained phenomena had been reported. Lina felt a thrill of excitement mingled with dread as she pored over the data. The quantum signature was unmistakable somehow. Against all odds, the wormhole had survived the collapse of the QLab. It had stabilized itself in the depths of space, a self-sustaining loop of exotic matter in twisted spacetime. And it was calling to her, a siren song that echoed in the depths of her quantum-entangled consciousness. She could feel it tugging at her, a yearning almost physical in its intensity. Lina knew with a cold certainty that the wormhole held the key to everything, to undoing the damage of the QLab disaster, to laying the quantum ghost to rest once and for all. She had to go to it to confront the consequences of her hubris face to face. But even as that resolve crystallized in her mind, Lina knew that she couldn't do it alone. The forces she was dealing with were too vast, too dangerous for any one mind to encompass. She needed help, a partner as brilliant and driven as she was, and she knew just where to find one. Lina strode through the imposing gates of the Prometheus Institute, the wind whipping at her coat. The towering spires of the research center loomed overhead, a gleaming monument to the cutting edge of human science. She marched up to the front desk, flashing her Astral Dynamics credentials at the startled receptionist. Lina Mercado to see Dr. Thorne. It's urgent. Minutes later, she was ushered into a spacious office overlooking the Institute's manicured grounds. The man behind the desk rose to greet her, his craggy face splitting into a surprised smile. "Lina," he said warmly, clasping her hand. "It's been too long. What brings you to my door after all these years?" Lina took a deep breath, meeting her old mentor's gaze squarely. "I need your help, Elias. I've done something terrible, and I don't know how to fix it." Slowly, haltingly, she began to recount the story of the QLab disaster, the years of research and breakthroughs, the heady rush of discovery, and the horrifying consequences of their hubris. She told him about the wormhole's ghost, the quantum specter that haunted her fevered dreams. Through it all, Doctor. Elias Thorne listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. When at last Lina fell silent, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers contemplatively. "Fascinating," he murmured, almost to himself. "A self-sustaining exotic matter loop ... The implications are staggering. If we could harness such a phenomenon, the possibilities for clean energy, propulsion, computation." He trailed off, seeing the anguished expression on Lina's face. "But that's not why you're here, is it? You want to undo it, to put the genie back in the bottle." Lina nodded miserably. "I have to, Elias. What we did ... what I did ... it was wrong. Hubris of the worst kind. And now the consequences are haunting me, literally. I have to make it right." "Doctor." Thorne was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then he looked up at Lina, a fierce light kindling in his eyes. "Then let's do it," he said simply. "Let's find this ghost of yours and lay it to rest once and for all." Lina felt a surge of gratitude and relief wash over her. With Elias Thorne at her side, she stood a chance of confronting the quantum specter, of wrenching some kind of redemption from the crucible of her mistake. Together, they would venture into the uncharted deeps of space, to the lonely corner of the cosmos where the wormhole waited. They would pit their combined brilliance against the eldritch forces of creation itself, and God help any who stood in their way, the quantum crucible. The small ship hurtled through the void, a silver needle piercing the infinite dark. Within its cramped confines, Lina and Elias hunched over their consoles, poring over the tidal wave of data flooding in from their sensors. They had been following the wormhole's quantum trail for days now, a breadcrumb path of exotic particles and fluctuating spacetime leading them ever deeper into uncharted territory. With each passing hour, Lina could feel the presence of her quantum ghost growing stronger, its whispers echoing in the chambers of her mind. "We're close," she murmured, almost to herself. "I can feel it." Elias glanced up from his readouts, his face lined with exhaustion and intense focus. "The signal is getting stronger," he confirmed. "We should have a visual any moment now." Lina leaned forward, staring out the cockpit viewport with hungry intensity. The stars ahead seemed to shimmer and dance, their light warped by the gravitational maelstrom they were approaching. And then she saw it. A swirling vortex of scintillating energy, a twisted knot in the fabric of spacetime itself. The wormhole hung before them, a gaping wound in the flesh of the universe. Lina felt a thrill of dread and exultation sing through her veins as she gazed upon the fruits of her folly. Here was the nexus of her deepest shame and her most fervent hopes, the quantum crucible in which her fate would be forged. "My God," Elias breathed beside her. It's ... it's beautiful." And it was. The wormhole pulsed with an eerie, hypnotic radiance, its writhing energies painting the void in shades of impossible colors. It sang with the music of the spheres, a symphony of creation pouring from its gaping maw. Lina shook herself, tearing her gaze away from the mesmerizing sight with an effort of will. She couldn't afford to get lost in awe and wonder, not now. They had a job to do. "Take us in," she ordered, her voice rock steady. Carefully, with infinite delicacy, Elias maneuvered their ship toward the wormhole's shimmering event horizon. Lina watched the readouts with bated breath as they inched forward, waiting for the first sign of trouble. But none came. The wormhole seemed to welcome them, its energies parting like a curtain to admit their tiny vessel. Lina felt a surge of relief wash over her, followed immediately by a pang of unease. This was going too smoothly, too easily. The quantum realm never gave up its secrets without a fight. As if in answer to her thoughts, the ship suddenly bucked and shuddered, the hull groaning under the strain of some unseen force. Alarms blared as the sensors registered a massive surge of exotic particles flooding the wormhole, a tsunami of quantum chaos crashing over them. "We've got a problem," Elias shouted over the cacophony. "The wormhole is destabilizing. It's going to collapse." Lina's heart seized in her chest. If the wormhole imploded with them inside it, they would be crushed into a singularity, their atoms scattered across a dozen divergent realities. But even as icy tendrils of panic clawed at her mind, Lina felt a sudden, unshakable certainty settle over her. This was it, the moment of truth. The quantum crucible was here, and she would either be forged anew in its fires or consumed utterly. With a wordless cry, she flung herself at the control console, her fingers flying over the interface in a blur of desperate inspiration. She poured everything she had into the ship's systems, every scrap of knowledge, every hard-won insight into the nature of the quantum realm. Beside her, Elias did the same, his brow furrowed in concentration as he wove his own brilliance into the tapestry of their efforts. Together they fought against the collapsing wormhole, pitting their will and intellect against the primal forces of the cosmos itself. For a heart-stopping eternity, the outcome hung in the balance, the ship bucking and straining like a wild thing caught in a hunter's snare, the fabric of reality itself twisting and warping around them. Lina felt her consciousness expanding, merging with the quantum field in a dizzying rush of clarity and connection. And then, with a final, shuddering groan, the wormhole stabilized. The maelstrom of exotic energies quieted, the space-time currents smoothing out into a placid, shimmering sea. Lina sagged back in her chair, her heart hammering in her chest. They had done it. Against all odds, they had tamed the quantum crucible, bending its eldritch power to their will. But even as relief and exultation sang through her veins, Lina knew that their true test still lay ahead. The wormhole was only the beginning, a doorway to a realm beyond human understanding, a cosmos of infinite possibility and unimaginable danger. As she gazed out at the shimmering vista before them, Lina felt the weight of her destiny settling over her like a mantle. She had been forged in the quantum crucible, tempered by the fires of her own hubris and determination. Now she would venture out into the great unknown, armed with the power and knowledge she had earned through bitter struggle. She would confront the ghosts of her past and the demons of her own making. And she would not falter. no matter what horrors the abyss held in store. For she was Lina Mercado, and the crucible had made her strong. The wormhole was a kaleidoscope of wonder and terror, a twisting corridor through the labyrinthine depths of spacetime. Lina and Elias navigated its shifting currents with a mixture of awe and trepidation, their ship a fragile cocoon against the mind-bending physics that swirled around them. With each passing moment, Lina could feel the presence of her quantum ghost growing stronger, its whispers echoing in the chambers of her mind with increasing urgency. It was calling to her, guiding her towards some unknowable destination deep within the heart of the anomaly. "We're approaching the wormhole's nexus point," Elias reported, his voice tight with tension. "The quantum readings are off the scale. Whatever's waiting for us, it's beyond anything we've encountered before." Lina nodded grimly, her gaze fixed on the shimmering vista ahead. She could feel the weight of her destiny pressing down on her like a physical force, the burden of her choices and her hubris bearing her inexorably onward. And then, with a final wrenching twist of spacetime, they were through. The wormhole averted itself inside out, spilling them out into a pocket cosmos beyond the bounds of conventional reality. Lina stared in slack-jawed wonder at the vista that unfolded before them. They hung in a vast, shimmering void shot through with veins of scintillating energy that pulsed and danced like living things. Vast structures of impossible geometry floated in the eerie half-light, their surfaces inscribed with glowing sigils that seemed to writhe and flow of their own accord. And at the center of it all, a towering figure of pure, blazing radiance. It shone with the light of 1,000 suns, its form in constant flux as it shifted and changed in ways that defied comprehension. Lina knew with a sudden, unshakable certainty that this was the source of the quantum ghost that had haunted her for so long, the living embodiment of the eldritch forces they had unleashed in their hubris. "What? What is it?" Elias breathed, his face slack with awe and terror. "I am the quantum oracle," the figure spoke, its voice a resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate in the very marrow of their bones. "The keeper of the mysteries beyond the veil, the guardian of the infinite possible." Lina swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet that incandescent gaze. "Why have you brought us here? What do you want from us?" The oracle regarded her for a long, timeless moment. "You have torn a hole in the fabric of creation, Lina Mercado. You have glimpsed the secrets that lie beyond the bounds of your narrow reality. There is a price to be paid for such knowledge." Lina felt a sudden, icy dread clutch at her heart. "Price? What price?" "The universe demands balance," the oracle intoned. "For every action, an equal and opposite reaction. You have unleashed forces beyond your ken, and now you must bear the consequences." It gestured, and suddenly Lina and Elias were no longer in their ship. They stood before the towering figure, their bodies mere motes of dust in its incomprehensible vastness. "One of you must remain here," the oracle declared, "to serve as the anchor, the fixed point around which the quantum fluctuations can stabilize. Only then will the wormhole be truly sealed, the breach in spacetime mended." Lina reeled, her mind scrambling to make sense of the oracle's words. To remain here, in this impossible place, cut off from everything and everyone she had ever known. It was a fate worse than death. A living hell of isolation and madness, an eternity trapped in the spaces between realities. She opened her mouth to protest, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but Elias spoke first. "I'll do it," he said quietly, his voice steady with resolve. "I'll stay." Lina whirled to face him, shock and horror writ large across her features. "Elias, no, you can't." He smiled at her sadly, reaching out to cup her cheek with a gentle hand. "It's the only way, Lina. You have to go back to carry on our work. The world needs you, needs your brilliant mind and your indomitable spirit." Tears blurred Lina's vision as she stared at her mentor, her friend, the man who had been her rock and her guiding light for so long. "I can't leave you here," she whispered brokenly. "I can't bear it." "You can," Elias said gently. "You must. For the sake of everything we fought for, everything we believe in." He leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Be strong, Lina. Be brave. And know that I will always be with you, no matter how far apart we may be." With that, he turned and stepped forward, into the waiting radiance of the quantum oracle. Lina watched in anguished silence as his form dissolved, merging with the incandescent light until there was no trace of him left. "It is done," the oracle intoned, The breach is sealed, the balance restored. You may return to your realm, Lina Mercado, but the price has been paid. Lina barely heard the words. She was numb, hollowed out by grief and loss, and the terrible, crushing weight of her guilt. Elias had sacrificed himself for her mistakes, had borne the consequences of her hubris without hesitation, and now she was alone. The last remnant of the quantum crucible that had forged them both. The weight of that knowledge settled over her like a leaden shroud, a burden she would carry for the rest of her days. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Lina felt a sudden, fierce spark of determination kindle in her breast. Elias had believed in her, had trusted her to carry on their work, and she would not let him down. She would return to Earth, to the life in the world she had left behind. She would take up the mantle of their research, delving ever deeper into the mysteries of the quantum realm. And she would carry Elias with her always, a living memory etched into the very fabric of her being. He had given her the strength to forge ahead, to brave the crucible of her own making, and she would honor that gift with every fiber of her soul. Lina turned to face the Oracle one last time, her eyes blazing with resolve. "Send me back," she said, her voice ringing with command. "I have work to do." The Oracle inclined its head in acknowledgement. "As you wish, Lina Mercado. May you find the strength to bear the burdens you have chosen." With a final, blinding flash of radiance, the pocket cosmos vanished, and Lina found herself back in her ship, the familiar confines of its cockpit surrounding her like a cocoon. The wormhole was gone, sealed by Elias' sacrifice, but its mark remained, a quantum scar etched into the very fabric of spacetime. Lina gazed out at the stars, her heart heavy with grief and purpose in equal measure. She had been forged in the crucible of her own hubris, tempered by loss and the unimaginable forces of creation itself. Now, she would take that hard-won strength and knowledge out into the world, to shape the future of humanity and unravel the deepest mysteries of the cosmos. It was a daunting task, a burden that would have crushed a lesser soul, but Lina Mercado had been reborn in the quantum crucible, and she would not falter. For Elias, for the world, and for herself.